Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies both new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week we play catch-up with some recent releases that disappointed at the box office: No Escape, We Are Your Friends, American Ultra, and Diary of a Teenage Girl. Plus, in our home media moment, the Simon Pegg flick, Kill Me 3 Times. We also pay tribute to horror legend Wes Craven and review his most enduring creation, the original Nightmare on Elm Street. And in our Oscar A to Z, another horror classic, The Bad Seed. Let's get right into it with our first new release, and that is No Escape. Joe?
Well, No Escape is an action thriller directed by John Eric Dodell and was co-written by his brother Drew. The film stars Owen Wilson, the Minus Man, Lake Bill from In a World, and Pierce Brosnan, formerly known as James Bond, and tells the story of a businessman played by Wilson trapped with his family in a war zone somewhere in Southeast Asia. I'm pretty sure it's Cambodia, though.
I believe Thailand.
Well,
that's where it was filmed, and that's who's up in arms about it. So
okay, Thailand. Well,
I'm going to say Thailand, but it's not specifically
it's not
stated.
But I mean, like, generally Southeast Asia with a history of turmoil, it's supposed to be some vague commentary about that area. And since they're bordered by Vietnam, so I'm like, I thought Cambodia could have been Thailand, but I'm like, Thailand's been pretty okay for a while. So I mean, I gave them the benefit of a doubt, but I could believe that. Well, this movie's filled with a lot of different things. There's a lot of slow motion that's used, which kind of emphasizes some tension, which sometimes kind of works and sometimes just seems silly. It's very uneven, and I think that's just kind of a way to describe the whole movie. Unfortunately, the characters are pretty one-dimensional and undeveloped, but they do give good performances, though. I mean, I can't deny that. In terms of the direction between the actors and the director there's definitely something working. I think the only thing that carries this plot are some legitimately really good performances which feed into the tension. And I felt that's the only reason I cared about these people and their plight was because the performances were so good. But I don't know if I've ever seen a movie that could somehow be both boring and intense all at the same time, leaving with a very kind of strange and underwhelming feeling throughout most of it. I was very conflicted, but really at the end of the day, with the exception of some honestly well-directed scenes here and there, it was just too overblown with shaky cam and really strange editing and probably a little too much excessive violence and generalization. I know there's some racist ideas, but nothing was explicitly said, so I can't really say that was completely blatant. The only reason I can't fail this movie or anything is because those performances were really good, and I want to give the actors credit for that. Both for Bell and Wilson. I thought they did an excellent job being parents in turmoil. So, I'll leave it with the D+. But really, it's mostly because of their performances.
Okay. Well, I definitely thought that we would have some debate about this one.
Okay.
It's not getting great reviews. But I have to say, I thought it was very intense, very heart-pounding. I must have said, oh, Jesus, about 7 or 8 different times. I was, locked in. I didn't find it boring at all.
Okay.
Now, I will say the slow-mo was a device that was definitely overused in this film.
Too much.
I didn't mind it in certain circumstances, but it definitely, about halfway through, it got to the point where, all right, we get it, slow-mo. I will give you another reason why we care about these characters. I agree the performances are great. Wilson really surprised me with this one. I saw the trailer and I just thought, I don't see this happening for Owen Wilson, but he gives a great dramatic performance. Lake Bell, very good as well. But I would theorize that I think we care about the characters also because of the children. Yeah. I think if the children were taken out of the movie and it was just Lake Bell and Owen Wilson running, I don't think we would care nearly as much.
Oh, no, I agree with you. I didn't really mention that. But yeah, the children actors are good too, and you're right. The family dynamic does make you care more.
Right.
I
mean, even knowing they were parents, but their kids weren't there with them, I think we wouldn't have cared, or I wouldn't have at least. Pierce Brosnan, I think, does a good job, but one of my main issues with, the script, I guess I could say, is there's one scene where he gets real jokey with his, cohort.
Yeah.
And I didn't really understand...
It's awkward.
...where that was coming from. It was weird, and I was trying to think, there's gotta be a dramatic movie where there really is a dramatic action movie where there's really no jokey scenes, and I thought of a really good one, The Impossible, which we all reviewed on the show for New Classic. I mean, that is straight ahead drama. They don't try to fit one single joke in that whole movie.
Well,
and it works.
To be fair, I mean, I guess they could be just saying that's his character trying to add some levity to it early on, but then he goes into serious mode later.
It's not even early on though. It's after they meet up with him again on the rooftop.
Basically.
He starts doing bits with his buddy.
Well, I mean, that's not really an issue. I mean, personally,
to me, it wasn't great.
Well, no, maybe not.
I'm with Dan on this one. It was really odd.
But I have to say, Joe, I'm way above you on this one.
Okay.
I give it a B+.
Wow.
Justin?
Well, I got to give it to director John Eric Dowdle. He has found a way to possibly have created the most racist film I have seen in possibly 4 decades.
I knew that was the first thing he was going to say.
Well,
this is such a monumentally, disturbingly racist film that if I were not doing this for the podcast, I would have debated walking out and getting my money back. Now, with that said, I will give it a little bit of points for the fact that I do respect the fact that Owen Wilson is stepping a little bit out of his comfort zone.
Oh, a lot, I would say.
I don't think it's a great performance, but I think it's okay. I did feel for his dilemma. I was curious as to what was going to happen to him. I think it got incredibly boring later on and runs on way too long, particularly with the overuse of slow-mo. I liked the steady cam at first.
It made me a little nauseous, personally.
And then it made me incredibly nauseous and started bringing up Paul Greengrass flashbacks.
Your buddy. Yeah.
God.
Oh my gosh, he cannot hold the camera straight.
Just don't mention the movie this podcast. That movie, don't mention.
No. We weren't going to go there. That was the only Greengrass name drop.
Okay.
Brosnan I thought was good, albeit that scene, you're right, is
Other
totally
than that, he
ridiculous.
was good, but that one scene was bad.
Though I loathed his racist caricature buddy that just reeks of westernization, whitewashing. There are going to be papers written about this for years. I guarantee it. This movie is an appalling atrocity.
Damn.
The only reason I'm not failing this movie is because of the performance and the moderately engaging story, if you can possibly look past the offensive racist stereotypes. I leave it with a D-.
Okay, so how do you make this movie not racist and have the story be the story?
First of all, you can add more structure instead of reducing the entire Asian population to basically background.
Well,
some of them were helping, though.
I want to say...
Not really.
I want to say...
The hotel staff certainly was.
Wait.
Not really. There's one character, and they kill him off almost immediately.
There might be elements which could be perceived as somewhat racist, but
Somewhat.
There were people... there were actually people being murdered by the other people. It was a specific group, a coup. I mean, the government was being overthrown. He's right. The people in the hotel were trying to keep them safe. There was a gentleman that hides them. I mean, it's not like this whole country are a bunch of savages.
And that is my question. How do you do this story and not be racist to you, Justin?
Well, like I said, for starters, you can stop reducing these characters to, like I said, pretty much background dressing. Their sole purpose... First of all, half of them don't even have lines, which is ridiculous.
Well, most of the white people don't have lines either.
To some extent. Two...
It is pretty dialogue low,
yeah,
actually.
There's not, other than the main 3 characters and the children, there's not a lot of dialogue in the whole movie, really.
I'm sorry, you're not going to be able to talk me out of the whole that these characters are borderline background dressing. And trust me, they're
so are the white characters, is what I'm saying, Justin.
Not even remotely close, Dan. Two, to continue with your question, Dan, which is a good one. If you're not going to give any sort of context as to where we are, why this is happening, don't make it this super political thriller and not give us any context.
It was barely political, though.
If you're not going to do anything with that, explain why they're there, why these people are rebelling. Do something with it. Don't even
Justin,
bother with the super...
Justin, I'm not going to say it was very well written, because it wasn't. But
Brosnan does say that.
But they do give a reason why they're there, and to some degree why the people are revolting, which...
Barely.
But it's there.
But
it's
Justin,
barely there.
To be fair, I thought that it wasn't super racist because it was implying that the Western influence was causing problems. So it was actually kind of turning it around. Not very well written. That was basically a couple lines.
That's fine.
It was
there.
It did exist.
It was there. It was just lazily inserted. It
That's
doesn't
fine.
really have any influence whatsoever. If we are going to do that, show somewhat of the Western influence, which they barely do. This movie is horrible in that regard.
there's not much there. I mean,
there isn't much there. I am not denying that, but he does give a reason. Barely There is still there, is my
Barely
point.
There is still there, but that doesn't dismiss the problem. Here is the sole role of the Western influence. They have a business banner. That is it. I was hoping we'd have like some
Pierce Brosnan explained a lot more than that.
Not really.
They take over the water, and they're upset about the Americans controlling their interests, and they feel like that they're going to be dominated by the West. Like I said, what I just said was pretty much what the movie gave us. I do agree. I think if they had explored them with the characters, interact with them, it'd be a much better movie. But it's just a straight up action movie where you're trying to get the family out. That's the focus. Where
you're basically reducing your entire setup to basically racist caricatures and whitewashing.
I didn't get the same thing out of it that you did. He made a clear reason for why this was happening. It was one specific group that was targeting them. There were Asian people that were helping, but all right.
Were they?
Yes.
Most of them were running away.
But some of them did help.
Well,
some did help, but...
Okay, all right, but running away is also not attacking, right? I mean, in all movies, a lot of people run away, Justin. That's not a racist thing.
I wouldn't... Yeah, but I wouldn't say, they're all helping. No.
No, they're not all helping, but I'm saying...
Well, and they're still basically reduced to,
well, look,
there's Asian. There's Asian. We're totally not racist, but we're racist.
I think it might be a little extreme to say that they painted the brush that every single person that was Asian in the movie was completely evil. I mean, they didn't do quite that.
They came pretty close to it.
But there were a few redeeming people. Most people that will be in a revolt will be running away and hiding anyway.
I would.
To be fair. But what about the hundreds of policemen that were trying to put down the revolt at the beginning?
Not even touched on ever again. So I'd say that entire scene
because they're all
is
dead.
more or less
They all got murdered.
They all got murdered, Justin. Hard to, All right, well, let's move on to We Are Your Friends. Or as I call it, One Track to Rule Them All.
Because you only need one track to be a DJ, right?
You didn't see it. You would have done the line if you had.
Thank you. Because I did
that in your honor.
Thank you.
This is a music drama film directed by Max Joseph in his feature debut. Some may know him as the cameraman and co-host for the TV show Catfish. He also co-wrote the script for this film. Zac Efron stars as Cole Carter, an aspiring 23-year-old club DJ, a part of the electronic or EDM scene. He connects with a seasoned DJ, James, played by Wes Bentley, also known as the game maker from the first Hunger Games film, who attempts to mentor Cole into a big break. But as attractive as that is to Cole, James's girlfriend Sophie, played by Emily Ratajkowski, is equally attractive and causes problems between the two. In addition, Cole has a group of go-nowhere friends that also threaten his chance for fame. We Are Your Friends is now known as one of the biggest bombs of all time. It has the third worst opening ever for a non-re-release film in over 2,000 theaters. But is it all that bad? I would say no, it's not that bad. Efron gives us another decent performance, and the subject matter and story will likely be interesting to a certain demographic, but that leads to the reason it did so poorly at the box office. Who is this movie for? Efron diehards likely have no interest in the EDM scene, and people that do go to the clubs on the weekends, not the movies. The real problem with the film, though, is that none of the characters are that appealing. It's sort of like the DJ version of Entourage. Nor do we really learn anything about them. Director Joseph also uses this much overused, artsy, words-on-the-screen device to complement Cole's narration, but then abandons it about the third of the way into the movie. All in all, I think its limited target audience will enjoy it. I'm not sure about others. I leave it with a C. Justin?
No, you're not going to hear too much argument from me, Dan. This, along with who's this movie for, I'd also say, what on earth is it trying to say? Because in some elements, I feel like it's trying to pull this sort of like Great Gatsby satire of these rich, spoiled kids living out in California. And other times I feel like it's trying to be almost like a documentary talking about the art of DJing, which I actually thought was relatively interesting. But like you said, they more or less abandoned it about a third of the way into the movie. Mm-hmm. And it honestly goes nowhere with this wildly lazy story regarding selfish, annoying whiners craving something better than what they have. And honestly, I don't feel like they really deserve. I feel like...
You don't think you had the skill?
Not from what I saw, but I'll be honest, Joe, I'm not the world's biggest electronic music fan.
What?
Yes, I know. Shockers.
What a shock.
Spoiler alert. But I mean, the performances are flat. The music I thought was, to be honest, rather forgettable. And It just left a bad taste in my mouth, even when they're trying to show some degree of emotion come the end, which went nowhere. I leave this one with a D.
I thought the music was fine. If you don't like electronic music, of course you don't like the music. That makes sense. Now, I don't think his track was that particularly great.
No.
But the soundtrack of the film I thought was fine.
No. This music's not bad. It's just forgettable. Like, there's not any, like, standout track I'm going to say, oh, yeah.
Right, but I guess my point is, to a non-electronic music fan, it all sounds the same anyway, so of course it's forgettable. You know what I mean? That's not really...
I mean, my only complaint with the soundtrack is I wish they weren't trying to cram every single track imaginable down our throats and just let the scene breathe. Because I felt like there were so many scenes that did not require background music whatsoever, and they're cramming this, like, really heavy, pounding electronic track.
Yeah, maybe sometimes, but I mean, that's who the movie's for.
Which is why...
People that want to hear.
Which is why I was trying to look past it, but it's still odd when there's, like, supposed to be this really tense moment and you're hearing...
But again, that's who this movie's for.
That's fair.
So, you know, I personally, I think your D might be a little harsh just based on the target audience for the film. I think that they will enjoy it.
Well, then, let me ask you something.
Yeah.
You gave Entourage a significantly lower grade. We can both agree on that, yes?
Not significantly. I gave it a D+. It's 2 grades less, yeah.
What's the major difference? Because, I mean, I gave Entourage a C- because of fan service, more or less, which is what the movie was trying to accomplish, and I'd say in that regard did fairly well, even though it was a big success.
As you know, I don't usually go for movies that the audience is limited to the fans. This movie is a standalone movie, so people that are going for that will enjoy it. Okay. But if you didn't watch the TV show Entourage, you miss a third of the jokes. I say jokes with quotes around it. And Entourage was basically just a celebrity cameo assembly line. This was... There were no celebrity cameos. I mean, the only people really recognizable are Zac Efron and the dude from Hunger Games. Yeah. The girl, I guess I kind of recognize. Maybe I just know the name, Radikowski. But I also think that this movie does have, I should say, attempts to have more of a heart. Zac Efron's character seemingly has a little bit of an arc. I'm not saying these are... I mean, I didn't give the movie an A.
No.
But this is why the movie certainly is better than Entourage, absolutely.
Well, most things are.
Most things are, I would say.
I won't argue that.
So, with that in mind, I mean, you graded Entourage higher than this. I mean, can you refute anything I've said?
I feel like it's a little bit apples and oranges.
But you made the comparison.
No. I only made the comparison because you drew from it in terms of these selfish characters.
Yes.
Which is a fair comparison to make. For this one, it was just... I thought everything about it was so flat and lifeless. I thought every character was unlikable and boring. I thought the story really never grabbed me at any particular point except for when they were talking about this art of DJing, which I thought pretty much during every time they went in that direction, why not just do a documentary? Be far more interesting than this totally shoehorned in story.
Nobody that likes EDM would ever go see a documentary about it.
Never heard of Planet B-Boy? Basically, every person that's done breakdancing is pretty much called upon it. It's considered one of the more top-tier documentaries.
Okay, well, breakdancing is a much different audience than EDM.
That's fair.
I would say. For one thing, it's an older audience.
But I mean, look at all the big hit music documentaries that have come out.
I guess my point is, the reason that maybe those scenes were interesting, and I found them interesting as well, is because we don't really know that much about EDM, or, you know, what makes a song particularly good at the club.
Yeah.
People that go to the club already know. So my point is, they're not going to watch it.
It's redundant, yeah.
Right. So, no, I don't think it would be better as a documentary. I did like those scenes, but I thought Efron did a good job. I thought his character was all right. I mean, the other one of his friends was also all right, but he was only in like 3 scenes.
That's probably the other big thing is it focuses on, at the start, Efron and his posse, then Efron on his own for probably an act and a half, and then we come back to his posse. We're supposed to feel attached to them, even though most of them are...
Yes, that was one of my huge problems with the movie. You're absolutely right. But that's why it's a C. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if you don't like the music, then yeah, okay. I think it would hit for its intended audience. Now, who that audience is the question mark. Up next is American Ultra. Justin?
Jesse Eisenberg plays Mike Howell, a stoner working at a convenience store with not much more motivation outside of writing his graphic novel and getting high with his girlfriend Phoebe, played by Kristen Stewart. Though, when late one night a mysterious woman utters a series of bizarre phrases to him, Mike finds himself in control of incredible assassin-caliber abilities, and more danger than he and his girlfriend could ever anticipate. If I were to say what was the most frustrating indie this year in a negative way, I'd probably say the D-Train. But the most frustrating in a relatively positive way, I'd probably give it to American Ultra. And here's why. I feel like for the start of this movie, there's a surprising amount of guilty pleasure quality. I went into this movie with zero motivation. I was expecting to be bored, rolling my eyes at stoner jokes. I was basically expecting this to become Pineapple Express 2.5. And I got a relatively interesting, albeit fairly check your brain at the door kind of movie when it's being an action comedy. This was written by Max Landis, who also wrote Chronicle, and you can definitely tell that there was a bit more of an action-heavy angle here. But when it shifts over into comedy with just some sporadic action, where there are many, many scenes featuring Topher Grace as the incredibly annoying villain, it just sort of gets a little all over the place. Though, when we shift back into the action scenes, it's actually a pretty good amount of fun for those willing to invest into the actual storyline. I just wish it was a bit more consistent with that, and I leave it with a B-.
Joe, let's hear from you next.
Well, I would say I relatively agree with you, Justin. I think that I was a little surprised by this one. I liked it more than I expected. I thought that Eisenberg and Stewart actually did okay jobs. I thought they had decent chemistry, and I was kind of invested with the characters at the beginning. I thought that some of the comedy did work. I thought some of the action worked. But I also thought it was very sporadic in that. Like, it was just kind of this roller coaster, and it was so quickly edited in terms of events that you really had a chance to breathe, which admittedly I guess what they were going for, but I found it kind of hard to really be engaged with the story when I couldn't really absorb anything. And also, most of the movie is kind of build up without explaining a whole lot, and you kind of know what it is, but they don't go into a whole lot of detail as to what exactly is happening. It's almost like it's begging for a sequel or a franchise, when I felt like by the end of the movie there wasn't really that much truly fleshed out. But despite that, there was some fun that was had. I just wish more of the comedy worked for me, and more of the action worked for me. Not quite as much as you, Justin. I leave it with a C.
Okay. Yeah, I think Eisenberg is good. Him and Stewart seem to be having a good time together. I can't say I was ever bored with the film. I think some of the action sequences are shot pretty well. The comedy was certainly hit or miss. But I would say that's where the positives kind of stop. Really good performers like John Leguizamo and Connie Britton are completely wasted. Others like Topher Grace are always horrible, so that doesn't help.
Wow.
Has he ever been good outside of...
Outside of That 70 Show, no. He's always terrible.
What about Spider-Man 3?
No, stop talking. Stop saying it.
We had to go there.
One of the worst parts of an awful movie. So
Thank you.
You know. But the movie is trying so hard to be this stoner cult hit. And a cult hit, I'm sorry, has to be born organically. You can't set out to make one.
Interesting.
You know? That's why I think the movie didn't do well at the box office. It wasn't attempting to be mainstream or indie.
That's a good
just
point.
Culty.
Splitting the difference.
That might be why it seems so unbalanced. Like,
You know
I
what
feel
I
like
mean?
it's supposed to be natural, but it seems a little too commercialized.
Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really fire on any of the levels I think that it wants to.
That's a good point.
So I'm actually a little bit even below you, Joe. It's a C- for me.
Okay.
Not a huge fan.
Yeah.
Guess not.
It was better than I was expecting it to be.
Oh, yeah.
It was about on par to what I expected.
Well, the people I saw with loved it.
Is that right?
Oh yeah, they were like, it was like one of the best.
Really?
They was like, oh man, and I was like, what do you think? Well, it had some problems, but they were like, they loved it. So I guess.
Other than Eisenberg and Stewart, which she was not that good in this.
She was decent.
She was okay.
Fine.
She was decent.
You know.
I've seen better though.
Yeah, I mean, after we've seen her in Still Alice and the Clouds, I don't know. This is more typical standard Stewart, I feel like.
I mean, I'll give her points for at least having chemistry with Eisenberg, which I was not expecting whatsoever.
No, they really did have a good time together. You could see that they had chemistry. Their characters, I'll give them this, their characters were fairly developed.
Yeah, pretty
I
well.
guess,
Yeah,
you know.
right, yeah.
There's a decent twist with her character as well. But everything else kind of just... Every other character. I mean, you know I love Leguizamo.
I was surprised they didn't use him that much.
You know? I mean, other than the fantasy football gag, which was pretty clever.
His scenes were great, and then...
He's only in a couple scenes.
He kind of leaves, yeah.
So, you know, he was wasted. Tony Hale from Arrested Development was wasted.
And you know, I know you don't like him, but why was Bill Pullman even in the movie? He
That's a
didn't.
good question.
He didn't do anything.
Oh yeah,
he did. He was in like one scene. Like, this is what's going.
He was
pointless.
What did that even serve?
No, he was pointless. You're right.
That's fair.
He's in the Topher Grace camp for me. He typically doesn't give a good performance, but you're right. I forgot he was even in.
See,
the movie.
he was like he's just barely there.
Yeah,
sleepwalking as usual.
It's true. So it's kind of a shame.
I do have to say though, like that's actually another negative I had for the movie. The fact that Topher Grace was the villain, and the fact that he was written as a completely incompetent villain, took all the suspense for me out.
Just ruins the tension.
Agree.
There's all the tension. I'm like, well, like, I mean, there was one, like, comedic scene that was funny where they have all the super soldiers just sitting in a dark, like, truck for no reason. Like, just have them sitting in a dark truck. Like, that was funny.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking, you guys are morons.
Right.
You know, like, the evil organization.
He's an awful villain.
He's terrible. Like, I had no fear from him whatsoever.
Right.
And that's why I wasn't worried.
I didn't either.
So
and neither was Eisenberg, and
no,
neither was Connie Britton. The only person that was really scared of him was Tony Hale, I guess, back at the office.
Pretty much.
But not even really scared, just more like torn, I guess, on where his allegiance needed to be.
And why was he still in the office after that, by the way? I didn't really understand why he wasn't bucking it. You know?
I don't know. Because it's a bad script.
CIA. Well, I mean, like I said, this is a check your brain at the door kind of movie. You either accept it or you don't.
Yeah, I guess so.
Is that necessarily an excuse? I don't know. But...
No, I mean, I'm glad you had more fun with it, Justin, but I was like,
No, I mean, I got a couple decent chuckles out of it, and like you both mentioned, I never was bored with this movie.
No,
it
wasn't bored.
I wish it figured out its angle and stuck with it. Mm-hmm. I definitely see where you're coming from on the cult angle, though.
Do you think if they decided to turn it into a franchise, because I really got that feeling, do you think
I think that's what the plan was,
Do you think there's room for improvement if they go that direction? I don't know what...
Yeah, well, there's certainly room for improvement on a C- movie, but... I mean,
the thing is,
where do they go with it? I don't know.
That's the thing. By the end of the movie, I felt like they kind of took away the stoner, silly angle and went to straight up like spy stuff. And I'm like, well, that seems more generic.
Yeah, any sequel would have to sort of lay all that stuff by the wayside,
and it wouldn't be American Ultra.
Make that part of the origin of the character, and then make it more standardized. I guess
the only real way I can see it going is if they pull a Desperado and more or less same story, bigger budget.
All right, well, up next we have Diary of a Teenage Girl. Set in 1976 in San Francisco, this film, very much not to be confused with a series of Christian young adult books in the same name, is actually based on a graphic novel by Phoebe Gleckner.
Of course it is.
15-year-old Minnie Getz, an aspiring cartoonist who is realizing her awakening sexuality, starts keeping an audio diary after she embarks on a secret sexual relationship with her bohemian mother's boyfriend, Monroe. Her on-and-off relationship with Monroe leads her to explore her sexuality with others, including a boy at school and a girl she meets at a drug-fueled party. Belle Powley plays Minnie, Kristen Wiig plays her mother, and Alexander Skarsgård is Monroe.
Oh, no.
Christopher Maloney, one of Joe's favorites, has a supporting role as Minnie's estranged father. Now first, let me say I love how well director and writer Marielle Heller captures the time period. Everything is spot on here, from the fashions, the set pieces, to the attitudes and the dialogue. Powley also gives an absolutely fearless performance, and the film requires her to be nude or partially so in quite a few scenes, and she is both at ease in front of the cameras as an actress while showing off her character's bashfulness with her own body, which is no easy feat. Wiig continues to show her range with her role, and the themes addressed here are definite conversation starters. But Diary gets bogged down constantly with every indie cliche that we always talk about on the show.
My God.
I am so sick of animation and cartoons as a trope. I get that she's an aspiring cartoonist, but guess what? So was Jesse Eisenberg in American Ultra. So was Jermaine Clement last week in People, Places, Things. It's happened in at least 10 other movies this year.
Find a new way to spin it.
I'm sick of it.
Yeah, thank you.
But other than that, the film is refreshingly honest about a whole host of things, including what it's like to be a teenager with raging hormones that you don't know what to do with. At first, I wasn't really sure how to feel about Diary, but the more it sat with me, the more I really did like it. I leave it with a B+. Justin?
I think you're absolutely right, Dan. Pally is fantastic in this movie. I also thought Wig was really good.
Well, as always. Well, I would say as always.
As almost always.
Right.
I just wish the story had a bit more substance to it. I couldn't agree more. The indie cliches are completely out of control. The animation, it's nice for, I'd say, about the first 30 minutes, but then they're ridiculously inconsistent with it. There's a whole scene where they interject her with an animated portion of an idol, and it should be interesting. It just comes off as weird. For me, the biggest issue with this movie is it tries to do all these different things, and I don't feel like it really accomplished any of them by the end of it. There's some really bold performances here, and I feel like what it's trying to say is smart. It's just, I wish it had honestly accomplished anything more than this is a quasi coming of age story. I leave with a B-.
All right, Joe?
First off, I'll say that the indie cliche stuff, I didn't expect to see it based upon the subject matter of the movie established pretty quickly. I found that kind of irritating. Didn't mind it too much in the beginning, but I agree. When I started towards the end of the movie, I was just like, "Can we just skip these sequences?" And I think that they kind of hurt the runtime of the movie. I wanted to get back to the actual story. I actually think there's a lot of substance to the movie, and I think it's kind of an example of quite blatantly showing and not telling. So even I feel like a lot is covered here, and I think you get that through the performances and some of the monologues. We really get to see what it's like to, see this young teenage girl struggling with her sexuality and this situation, which seems very believable. And the movie itself is, for me, was very uncomfortable. I will confess.
Uncomfortable subject.
No, it's very uncomfortable.
I'll be honest. I wasn't sure. I didn't feel comfortable watching it.
Okay.
But I don't think that's detriment to the movie. I think it's covering a very uncomfortable subject matter, and I think being incredibly honest about it in a way that I haven't seen. So, and I'll admit it. How old is this girl?
She's 22 in real life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I knew she had to be at least 18 if she's doing nude scenes.
I was
definitely.
But that was
yeah,
the throwing
she's
off,
actually 22.
Okay. Well. Okay. That made me feel a little better. But the point is, she doesn't look 22, so she was able to pull off this 15, 16-year-old girl, and even so, the idea of it is still very uncomfortable. But like I said, so honest and real and very gritty, which is kind of offset by some of those indie cartoony things, which I guess it's trying to emulate her innocence, kind of, but I don't know. Just a film that's going to cover this subject matter and do it so well and honestly and kind of make you feel that discomfort and the complication of a developing young girl and her confusion about her identity. I think it was done very well. I leave it with an A-.
Justin, what were the things that the movie was trying to accomplish that you felt they didn't? Because I agree with Joe. I think they accomplished a lot.
They go in a lot of different directions. Like, they talk about losing her virginity, and then
she has sex. She's underage.
As a sexual being, and then taking in terms of, is she just into that, or has she identified with that, or her family? Like, Kristen Wiig does a really great job in this movie. Gets maybe 10 minutes of screen time tops.
But it's not really her story.
It's not all her story.
It's not, but you can definitely tell that her relationship with her mother is kind of a big deal.
It is. And some of that's just kind of hinted at for backstory. But I think we get enough. There's a lot going on in this girl's head. And through the experience of what happens, it's not like it's just one event. It's constant. And there's a couple of relationships she has. And it seems very believable, because a girl like that's not going to be thinking necessarily blatantly about her mother. Maybe she's got a lot suppressed. Because it seemed that they hinted there might have been some issues early on.
No, and that's a fair point. But then we have all these different angles, and the final answer is we're not really going to go anywhere. This is just where it stops.
But I mean, I think Dan might say, "Hey, it's like life." I'm just saying, like, that seemed like it was going for something very real, very believable, and not necessarily a clear answer. I think, though, by the end of the film, she does grow. I think that
she does grow.
She grows a lot.
I don't feel like we have a legitimate arc. I just feel like we have the start of an arc and then we stop.
Well, why don't you think it's a legitimate arc, though?
Because it's like, okay, we have start, very excited about new life changes.
Okay, which would be the way she thinks, probably.
Enters in, and then is just, I'm going to be me. which is fine, but you've been you for the entire movie.
No,
that's basically how it ends.
Well, she's struggling to find out who she is, and she goes flip-flops.
And I don't feel like we ever accomplished that.
But she explores a lot of different
because
avenues.
neither does she.
But again, that's key to an arc.
All right, well, we've talked about this in a number of different movies, but a 15-year-old girl...
She's going to be thinking.
...is not going to have an established point A, point B arc.
I'm not saying that's supposed to be a thing. I'm just saying, if you're going to have a coming-of-age story, give us somewhere to go instead of just this is still here. That's nice, but that's not an ending. That's a cop-out.
But it would... I don't think so. I think it's realistic.
I'm not so sure.
Well, she definitely...
I mean, if you're going to wrap things up, you need to show that there has been a legitimate arc. I don't feel like this movie accomplished that.
I think she says one line towards the end when she meets up with...
Pretty solid.
What's-his-face? Monroe again, that establishes that she did change and she has moved on and she did have somewhat of an arc.
The changes is not my argument. My argument is I don't feel like there's any resolution. Change is like straight out the gate. The problem is the changes don't really go anywhere. They just sort of end. I don't feel like this movie really strives well for closure. It just sort of...
I don't think there would be in the situation.
And to be fair, I think within the context of the movie, I think Dan's right. That one line does give closure for her in regards to at least the biggest part of the movie.
It's very much okay, this is how you're going to end it. I can deal with it, but I feel like there are 3,000 ways to make this so much better.
Maybe, but I think that leaving it a little messy with some issues kind of hanging over is more believable for the character. I mean, she's got a long way to go in her life. She's still pretty young. I do want to just interject, though, at the point. Wig was very good in this. I think that this is... really, I do agree. I think that in terms of just, pure dramatic, no comedy whatsoever.
None.
She was great.
Yeah.
I wish we had seen more of her, but I think that every scene she was in, she just, stole it.
Yeah.
Though, thankfully, it wasn't too much.
And I don't think for the characters in the film we needed to see more of her.
No, I thought it was fine, honestly.
Well, our home media moment is kill me 3 times. That's going to be with Justin.
Simon Pegg plays Charlie Wolf, a professional hitman who receives a call to kill Alice, played ironically by Alice Braga, the unfaithful wife of a wealthy proprietor. However, when the hit ends up supposedly carried out by an outside party, a series of violent escapades, including an insurance fraud scheme and a revenge plot, ensues. If this sounds completely and utterly all over the place, it's because it basically is. Admittedly, the cast of this movie does better with the material than they should. I liked the change of pace from Pegg, even though I wish he had such better material to work with. But the jumpy storyline creates plot holes and doesn't really give the dark humor the punch it needs. Some parts are mildly amusing, others are, quite frankly, unpleasant. I won't say it was a complete disaster of a movie. There are some entertaining moments, and I feel like if they had just reworked this a couple times, this could have been a really interesting kind of dark humor thriller like Life of Crime last year. Instead, it's just more or less forgettable. I leave Kill Me 3 Times with a C.
All right, Joe.
Well, we have yet another Tarantino knockoff. Very poorly written.
Absolutely.
The acting was okay, but the script was incredibly dull. And worse, Pegg has virtually nothing to do within this movie. I thought it was incredibly boring and virtually impossible to get through. And you guys probably have a better track of memory for grades for me throughout the year. But I absolutely hated this movie. I leave it with an F.
Wow.
Oh.
Yeah, not too many.
Yes, I found this incredibly boring.
Well, I am kind of between you guys. I don't think it was quite as bad as all that, Joe, but I did think it was interesting to see Pegg playing against type, but I only thought it worked sometimes. Other times I thought it was really forced, and I would say that was probably more due to the script than to Pegg's performance. Probably. But I think much of the film is kind of forced, for that matter. The humor, the cleverness of the twists, I think it tries way too hard. I don't think it's awful, but it's very reminiscent of other better movies. You mentioned Tarantino. I think Seven Psychopaths is obviously another go-to here.
Definitely.
So I leave Kill Me 3 Times with a D+.
Okay.
I didn't think it was horrible.
But it's not good.
I mean, yeah. Joe obviously hated it.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was that hard to get through. I just didn't think there was much to it, is all.
I almost fell asleep. So I can't
well,
really...
you fell asleep during Grand Piano, so what does that tell you?
That was during the credits, though. The 19-minute
Yeah,
credits.
the credits were very long.
To beautiful
Okay.
There's an
classic
entire
music.
movement.
No, you're right. No,
Okay,
no,
okay.
don't get me wrong. If this had been a guilty pleasure, I probably would have given it like a C or something. That's how it works for me. I just found it incredibly uninspired and thought the pacing was awful. I mean, I knew that it was trying to be clever with the little vignettes, but I mean, they're like, normally when it's out of sequence, I find it interesting. I just found it kind of unnecessary and confusing. Like, oh, you're trying to be like Tarantino. You're about 20 years too late there.
Yeah.
I think the pig, I really wanted him to kind of excel here, but he just isn't given much to work with.
He isn't, and it's not really his fault.
Yeah, he doesn't do a bad job. It's just the script is mediocre at best, underwhelming at worst.
I don't know, man. I thought it was.
Oh, I can think of worse things to say about it than underwhelming.
I thought it
That
was.
was that was the nice way of putting it, Dan.
I thought it was practically
At
lifeless
worst,
myself.
yeah, atrocious, lifeless. I mean, it's not a good script.
No, that's the biggest problem.
Cut and dry.
Maybe there's some potential in there somewhere.
Well, I mean,
but I don't know.
I can see where the humor could have resonated. It's just I feel like
I didn't laugh once.
I don't think I laughed. Well, I might have chuckled once.
Did you laugh a little more?
I think like in the early bits with Peg, thought a couple of those scenes were kind of amusing. I thought
I thought the monologue at the very beginning was kind of funny, but that was like the first 2 minutes of the movie, so I can't really give it to a monologue.
The middle stuff is drier than dry, lifeless, and dull, mostly because Peg's not in it.
Yes, that was rough
The
marketing.
directing wasn't horrible. It was just uninspired. I mean, it was just cribbing from
It was incredibly
literally
uninspired, I'll give you that.
everyone. So, all right. Well, we have two older films to talk about, our double feature. But before we do that, one of them will relate to this. But Joe, we're going to talk to you first about Mr. Wes Craven, one of your film heroes, I would say, really. He passed away recently at age 76 of brain cancer. I don't think anybody really even knew he was sick. So, obviously, huge slate of horror films through the years. Most notably, I think Nightmare on Elm Street, but also Scream series, of course.
I'll mention
People Under the Stairs. I mean, many. So let's talk about this guy.
Yeah, I have to say though, when I think Justin mentioned it, I was totally surprised. I mean, I know whenever one of these major influential people in film die, it's always a tragedy. But just this one, just completely sneaking up, really caught me by surprise. Because I mean, we've got like really one of the great horror masters. I mean, really, just not just his directing, but his involvement and his passion. Because you guys might not know this, it was actually originally his intention to be a kind of just a more straightforward, serious, dramatic director, but it didn't really take. And he started doing horror films because of all he could get. But he turned out to have such a good talent with it. He said, you know what? That's what I'm meant to do. I'll embrace it. And he ran with it. And here we have like really one of the great names, Wes Craven.
True.
If he produces something, he supported
and
indie
he
films.
Eventually did go back to drama for at least that one movie, Music of the Heart with Meryl Streep, which he was Oscar nominated for. So he had a big enough name at that point he could kind of do what he wanted, and that's awesome. He decided to sort of branch out a little bit from what people knew him for.
That's true, but I mean the bulk of his stuff.
Obviously.
He kind of almost embraced his place as a horror figure because he would really try to get other people's work off the ground. He would like fun festivals. He just loved the horror community, and he was just a big supporter of it as well as being a proprietor of it.
I'm glad you brought that up, Joe, because that's the one thing I've always thought was, after hearing about this, I've never heard a single person ever say a nasty thing about Wes Craven.
Wes Craven's
very loved in the industry, for
just
sure.
A really nice guy. If you ever saw an interview, he's just really cheerful, which is funny. You think a horror guy, but no, just a really, really nice guy. And I mean, for me, we'll talk a little about this later, but I just want to say, Freddy Krueger for me is like one of the great slashers. He's one of my favorite. I really love the Elm Street movies, at least the good ones, and the bad ones to some extent. But no,
they're campy, right?
No, but they're campy and fun at least. But I think there's some really awesome horror stuff there, just classic '80s stuff. And I think with the new Nightmare, I thought it was just a really bold film and a very layered, very awesome that he kind of sort of took a parody but made it really frightening in a very different way. So he definitely had some really interesting stuff there. Very, very great writer and director for sure. But also, I mean, provided some really great films. Like, I actually forgot about this, but Hills Have Eyes, the original,
definitely
one of my favorites. Just about those gritty, primal fears. Just like, as old as it is, it's just so good. I thought that was fascinating as well. And of course, his influence on Scream, his ability to kind of poke fun at the horror cliches, but still kind of build upon that.
Right.
And I always thought that the original, his first two Screams, the only ones I saw, I thought were pretty well written. I really enjoyed it. Even some films that are lesser known that I found that I liked were Wes Craven, like They from
Serpent
the
in
early
the Rainbow.
2000s, and even Red Eye was his.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a couple ones that are a little under the radar that I enjoyed. I didn't know were his.
Have you ever seen Shocker?
No.
Okay.
Everyone
I
seems-
haven't either, but I remember, I was far too young to see it when it was out, but I remember it had a Megadeth song. Megadeth covered an Alice Cooper song in the soundtrack, so it was on MTV a lot. And I just remember thinking, man, this seems like a cool movie. I was not like a horror kid at all, but I thought it seemed really cool, as a concept. And I still have never seen it, actually, but I didn't know if you did or not.
No, actually, that's one I haven't seen. There's a couple I haven't, but I've seen a lot of the things that he's produced and he's cut it forward. And I think he just had a huge impact, and I really think he'll be missed.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, without question, Joe.
Well, even at that time, now that was 1988 when Shocker came out. I was 11, and I had never seen a Wes Craven movie. I don't know if I'd ever even seen a horror movie, but I knew when they ran the ads, Wes Craven Shocker, I knew that, oh yeah, Wes Craven's the dude that does all the horror movies.
Yeah, he is the guy.
Even as somebody that never saw a horror movie, I knew this is the dude.
It is the master.
I know him obviously mainly from the Scream films. That was sort of one of my first, big forays into horror in college when Scream came out. Nev Campbell was in it. Big Craft fan, big Party of Five fan. All right, I'm going to go see this Scream movie. It looked funny. And it terrified me. It was for somebody that doesn't watch horror, that's a scary movie.
It's kind of creepy, actually.
Oh, yeah.
So that was sort of my original interaction with his filmography. And yeah, I was blown away. And still to this day, I would say Scream is among my absolute favorite horror movies.
I think it just continues to show how versatile Craven was as a filmmaker. For me, this hit me on a different level because his last movie was My Soul to Take, which on paper sounded brilliant and ended up being one of the worst movies of that year. So I was hoping he would have at least one more movie to direct that would sort of wrap up his career. Instead, all he had is the producing of the Scream show, which...
he had minimal... He put his name on it.
As he does with most things.
Is all he did. And I know he was not happy that they changed the mask, which I wasn't either.
Oh,
Yeah,
no more Ghostface.
That's not cool.
It's a pretty iconic mask. That's
You
what
can't
you
rip that
keep
off.
in it, but
Hey,
whatever.
3 Halloweens as a kid. One is Ghostface.
Is that right?
Yep.
Wow. In
Yeah.
a row?
In a row.
Okay.
3rd through 5th grade, Ghostface.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, it's a classic.
It was, man. It really is sad, and hopefully John Carpenter will learn. You don't want to go off on a bad note, so come on, John. Come on, make a good movie.
Yeah.
You're getting up there, man.
Well, speaking of the Craven legacy, we decided to sort of veer off a little bit from our typical old classic. In fact, the one that we had planned for this show and had watched for it, we're going to talk about next week. Instead, we decided to watch A Nightmare on Elm Street, the very original from 1984. So, Joe, why don't we hear about that?
Nightmare on Elm Street is the 1984 American supernatural slasher horror film written and directed by Wes Craven, the master, and it was the first film, obviously, of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, which I love. The film stars Heather Langenkamp, Robert Englund, of course, as Freddy, and Johnny Depp in his first major feature film debut. And I think he does a pretty good job.
Yeah.
Well, set in the fictional Midwestern town of Springwood, Ohio. Of course, bad things always happen in Ohio. Drew Carey can tell you that. The plot revolves around several teenagers who are stalked and killed in their dreams, and thus killed in reality, by Freddy Krueger. The teenagers are unaware of the cause of this strange phenomenon, but their parents seem to hold a dark secret from long ago regarding him. Really, what's there to say? Just amazing work with lighting, editing, directing, creating this awesome atmosphere. Some really good effects, I think, for makeup, gore. It's a little cheesy, but it's still kind of frightening because of the dreamlike quality. And I've always been really fascinated by Freddy as a villain. Just that supernatural killer that haunts you in your dreams just adds a whole psychological, supernatural element that he's not really there, but he can still affect you. I don't know. It's always really creeped me out. I've always loved the design of him. I think England's really awesome with a fairly minimalist aspect of the character, which unfortunately he kind of ends up talking more later on, which is fine, but he kind of has it well restrained here.
You had to start somewhere.
It's true, and I think that for the most part the cast does a pretty good job. I will admit that some of the acting is a little subpar for some people and a little campy, so that's one minor thing that could hold it back, but for the most part, it's a great story, great music, atmosphere, great start to an amazing franchise with, I think, probably the best slasher in all of horror slasher movies. So I leave it with an A.
Okay. Yeah, it's certainly, this is my first time watching this film. I think it's certainly legitimately scary.
Mm-hmm.
I do think there's fantastic practical effects. You mentioned that. The makeup is great. The story is really good.
Mm-hmm.
I think Freddy's a great villain, and I think to play on the absolutely universal theme of sleep, something literally every person and
Depends
on the
it.
planet do, I think it's brilliant. You have to sleep, so how do you escape that? You mentioned this when we were watching the credits roll. So few people worked on this thing.
No, and I'll be honest, I think I never really looked at the credits that closely before,
Yeah.
and that actually made it more awesome for me because I realized how indie this was. I mean,
Yeah.
between the cast and crew, maybe like 50 people.
Right.
And I'm like, well, that's really impressive.
I would say not even, maybe.
Maybe less. And I'm
Yeah.
like, that made me speak to the dedication to this movie.
And it just
so
proves
good.
that you can do on a small scale and have it be completely effective.
Yes.
I do admit, you said the effects were a little cheesy. I would say for the time, I think they're probably pretty good.
I was going to say, they're pretty top-notch for
I know,
80s.
I mean, a little bit, but I still think the practical effects are great. But then again, I mean, don't get me wrong, they are great. Craven's great for that. But when I compare him to Carpenter or Cronenberg,
Okay.
there is a level above it.
Okay. Well, I would say the cheesiness factor does come in the acting.
A little bit.
I think Depp is good. Lannicamp's good, I guess.
What about the some of them cops, though?
No, they were bad, and a lot of the adult people were not good.
Her mother was pretty bad.
Her mother was probably the worst of anybody.
I thought her
of the
mother was
major characters.
legitimately
The great
not.
Lin Shaye.
Yeah, Lin Shaye was good in her 2 scenes as the teacher. That's true. You're right on that.
She was good.
But everybody else was
Pretty good.
fairly average, I would say. But I do leave it with an A as well. Justin?
Well, there's certainly not going to be any arguing in this one.
Hope not.
This is Craven's one of his best, if not his best. Last House on the Left, I think, is really good for its minimalism.
Yeah. I think Hills of Eyes, though, is more
Hills
thinking
of
about
Eyes
it.
is very good in its own way too.
Good competitor, though.
Would
Like,
you say that's his best, Hills Have Eyes?
I mean, I love Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, I think it's a great film, but Hills of Eyes is like
It's
legitimately
definitely spooky.
one of the scariest movies I've ever seen.
Okay.
So that's pretty effective.
Oh yeah. But with this one, the concept is original. What I love about this is he's not so much worried about the scares. He's worried about his main concern, I feel like, with this movie is painting the picture that gives you the scares. And I feel like he does that brilliantly. All these practical effects, finding the right lighting, finding the perfect atmosphere to get you at the right moment, and build that with the characters. Robert Englund, probably one of the most underrated, if not the most underrated character actor.
Robert Englund's great, man.
No.
I wouldn't think he's underrated. He's
Well,
the man.
he's-
He's the man.
Yeah, I think everybody generally knows that he's amazing.
he's like the horror
I wouldn't say
icon,
he's
man.
He's
underrated.
amazing, but he's typecast, is my point. Like,
Well, he doesn't seem to mind.
Yeah, but
he doesn't mind.
eats
I
it
mean,
up.
he's having a ball.
I mean,
But-
I've seen him in other things. He's not a bad actor, but you're right. He pretty much embraces the horror monster.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think if he wanted to audition for
No.
other things, he probably could.
Thing is,
but
Justin, Robert Englund
he embraces
he
the
No,
character.
he really does, and
Yeah,
I
so.
admire him for that. It's just, I also think here we get a bit more than the puns. I do think he talks way too much in this one as well as in the other ones.
Really?
He doesn't talk very much in this, though.
I don't.
I think
so.
only because they space out his appearances,
But
shall we
Ju-
say?
But Justin, that's one of the things that separates Freddy from all the other slashers. Usually, like Mike Myers and Jason, they don't talk at all. You know?
But I mean, here's the thing.
Uh huh.
I feel like Freddy conveys so much more with presence than necessarily with dialogue.
You're right, but I think the fact that he can goad you a little bit is creepy. Remember, like that scene, "This is God," the claws.
That's
Like,
about the first
that's-
line he utters, too, and that is
that's disturbing.
terrifying.
No, that scene is like the exception that proves the rule. It's a legitimately creepier line, and then comes more or less everything else.
Well, I mean, like, I can understand. I do agree it does get worse later, but, like, honestly, one of the defining traits of Freddy is the banter. I mean, even in the first film.
and that's sort of an issue with me. He starts out as kind of scary, and then it's more or less I'm appreciating more of the intricacies that build up to the scares rather than ooh, Freddy's scary. Alongside that, the acting outside of Langenkamp and Depp, who I think gives one of his better performances of his career in this.
I definitely wouldn't go that far. I mean,
I think
his
he gives,
90s stuff is pretty solid.
You like Edward Scissorhands more than I do. However,
Also, Benny and June, Gilbert
Benny and
Grape,
June is great.
Your favorite Ed Wood. I mean, the 90s was a
Donnie-
good decade
Gilbert
for him.
Grape so much. in
Donnie
that regard.
Well, that's your
Brasco.
problem. Donnie Brasco, which I've never seen, but Joe loves.
That's,
I'll run it sometime.
that
And
gets
then we'll
more
talk
credit
about
than
it.
it ever deserved.
All
But
right, anyway.
to get back on track,
Yeah, he's good in this, but
no, he does a solid job in this. Which
It's pretty good for a big starting role.
I was gonna say he's like what 18 in this,
Maybe if that.
but like you both mentioned, the outside actors not quite so compelling. But I mean, it's nothing that's completely compromising the overall product. It's just a small hindrance. I'm with you both, gentlemen. It's an A.
So, Joe, in the future installments of Nightmare, when he does get a little more jokey and clowning around with the people, does that bother you like it bothers Justin?
No.
Okay.
I will
You
admit,
embrace it.
I will admit that it's not as scary. Most of them. But it's fun.
But that's sort of the attempt, right? I mean, I don't think Nightmare 4 is specifically going for absolute horror.
By the time, I'd say, you could argue maybe even the second one, but I think past Dream Warriors, they embrace full camp. And
Yeah.
it's unfortunate because, it's the same trap that a lot of the slashers fall into.
Well, New Nightmare's a little bit of a return to form.
That's kind of different, Justin.
It's very different, but
that's separate. But of the the general canon,
That's what I meant.
you're
yes.
right. Yeah, it's silly, but I enjoy it. It's some of it's guilty pleasure, but the effects are still good. There are some scares. It's a fun time.
Mm-hmm.
But this is probably the best of the original ones.
How does this one compare to the recent one with Jackie Earle Haley?
Well, Justin could tell you more about that because I'm such a big fan.
You didn't want to see it?
And this is before I saw movies for free. I boycotted this movie.
Is that right?
I was
so even on DVD, you
okay.
never watched it?
never. And people tell
Wow.
me that what's his name, Rorschach, did a good
Yeah,
job.
Jackie
Jackie
Earle.
Earle Haley.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
great, but then I heard it was an exact redo, and I'm like, you know what? So I'm curious, what do you think, Justin?
it wasn't. I should start off by saying what you've heard is right. Jackie Earle Haley is a worthy successor. He did actually get the approval of Robert Englund to take on the role.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
And the movie being under par with the original is not his fault whatsoever.
I heard it was basically shot by shot almost.
In some regards, yes, and others, no. There's definite differences. Though the most interesting of which was the motif that what if Freddy didn't do what everyone thought he did?
Make him more sympathetic.
What was an interesting angle to play, but then they decide they're not going to do it.
I will admit that might have made his character a little more complex, but I kind of like Freddy as a force of nature. He was just an evil guy. I think that makes him scarier, honestly.
Like I said, there are a couple differences. Rooney Mara does an okay job. Yeah. I believe Connie Britton played her mom, who does better than 84 Mom. It's also Connie Britton.
It's Connie Britton. Other than American Ultra, she never gives a bad performance.
Yeah, well,
it's true. It's
Yeah. Yeah, it wasn't her fault.
It's just a classic case of a reboot that could have been more and was just average.
Certainly some movies to check out in Craven's filmography, from Joe's recommendations here.
Hey, I didn't even know that Red Eye was his. I just knew I liked it.
Yeah, I didn't know that either, actually.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Yeah.
All right, well, the final film we have for you is in our Oscar A to Z. It's another sort of classic horror-ish film, and that's The Bad Seed. This is a 1956 film nominated for 4 awards: Best Actress, 2 Supporting Actors nods, and Best Cinematography. Based on the play and the novel of the same name, The Bad Seed is an early horror thriller film that sees young Rhoda Penmark, played by Patty McCormack. She looks like the perfect little girl, but when she loses a penmanship competition to her classmate Claude, then Claude turns up drowned in the lake, Rhoda's mother, played by Nancy Kelly, begins to wonder if maybe Rhoda had something to do with it. The Bad Seed reveals its hand slowly, and much like a recent film that got positive reviews from all of us, The Gift, and in that way it makes the audience patiently wait for the characters to get to their next clue. However, because of its lengthy runtime, it does drag in some places because of that, and some of the acting could have been improved, but McCormack is a perfect little demon child with apparently no soul, something that I don't think we'd seen in a young girl on the screen before. I do wish the movie was allowed to go with the original ending from the novel, as the play did, but movie codes being what they were at the time, didn't really let that happen. What happens is still unexpected, and I won't reveal exactly what happened, seeing as there was essentially a PSA at the end of the movie. Did you guys get to that?
Yep.
Asking the audience to not spill the beans. I think both endings are interesting, but I think the original ending may have been more shocking than what we saw on the screen in the film version, but I give The Bad Seed a B+. Justin?
I thought it was cool saying, please don't spoil the movie.
That's cool.
But to get right to it, the best and the worst thing about this movie for me is its respects to its stage roots. In some regards, this is very well done. I like the fact that they gave everybody a curtain call at the end. And I do like the atmosphere that it sets up with these characters. I think McCormick is spot on as this girl.
Yeah, she's real good.
However, I think a lot of the adults try way too hard in the stage angle with these big inflections, and it quickly descending into overkill, and doing so sort of soils some of the suspense, which ultimately culminates in, as you mentioned, the unfortunate ending that came as a result of the Hays Code.
Mm-hmm.
Because God forbid we do anything slightly gutsy in the 50s. But
I don't think it's that unfortunate. I think it still works. I just think the original would have been better.
It's okay. It's just kind of hokey. Like, editing-wise, it's pretty good. But in terms of fitting with the entire context, it's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
But for the compelling story, the interesting characters, and some definite suspense at the right times, it's pretty good. I live with a B+.
Okay. Joe?
Yeah, I think that the young actress here does an excellent job as being a very frightening young girl. That's definitely the best thing about the movie. And I actually think that this kind of subject matter involving child murder, that's pretty ballsy for the 50s. So the ending notwithstanding, which I do agree was hokey, and I did not like it all, personally. I felt like that whole idea was pretty disturbing and unnerving, and I thought it was pretty bold for sure. I think that the acting kind of fluctuated. Some of it was really good. Other times it was kind of a bit hokey. And there are some pacing issues. I think the movie runs on too long.
It drags a bit, yeah.
And I mean, there is that slow buildup, but I kept thinking to myself, when did they get to reveal this?
Well, it gets slow burns, it gets slow burn.
Yeah, well,
I don't know if this was a good slow burn.
For me, it wasn't. So I thought it was a little too slow of a burn. I thought the parents took a little too long to catch on. But even so, I thought it was a pretty intriguing story and definitely bold for the time. But it wasn't quite what it was amped up to me. I'm a little below you guys. Leave it with a B.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Now, you know the original way it ended?
No, but I wasn't a big fan of the way that it burnt out, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
No pun intended.
But, Well, even so, I feel like they could have wrapped it a little less neatly,
Yeah.
It felt like
it came a little too full circle.
Seemed like a little too...
Well, but this is at a time when every horror movie didn't leave itself open-ended for multiple sequels.
That's fair.
I mean, if this was made today, it would be a lot more open-ended than it was.
That's true, but I mean, if this were like a monster horror movie or something, like Creature of the Black Lagoon or Godzilla, there might have been some ambiguity, at least involving the message.
I guess that's true.
What have we learned here? Will there be other monsters? And it's a little different, obviously, but I feel like they could have had some lingering horror there. It wrapped up a little too tight, like, yay, happy ending.
Well...
Ish.
This is a dark story.
Yeah.
I
don't know if I would call it a happy ending.
It was
happier than the original ending, I'd say.
Yes, I would agree with that. But
I thought
still,
it kind of broke the tone of the rest of the movie, I thought.
Okay.
Agreed. You're right, Joe. It's definitely gutsy for its time. However, if you're going to do that, it's okay to have a melancholy ending.
I think a little more bleakness could have been added.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I can't deny that. The studio's hands were tied, so it is what it is, I guess.
Yeah, but I mean, studios have been fighting censorship for ages. I feel like they could have done more in this regard.
Yeah, then again, a lizard's not the same as a little girl.
Yeah, I mean, we weren't there. I don't know.
Nah, I got
hard
nothing.
to say.
Who's to say? All right, well, that is going to do it for the show this week. We have the mini-sode up for the best and worst of summer. We've got the 2-year anniversary video show up, the Back to the Future mini-sode. So a lot of things, if you like your film fanatics in smaller doses, we've got a bunch of things to check out in that regard. Of course, Joe, on the Merlin channel, you've always got sort of bite-sized things to check out. solo reviews, etc.
Oh yeah, I mean, I got back from my convention, so the panel's up there.
Yes.
Got some pickups.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting
Nice.
stuff there.
Some screenings, and just a little montage I did in my experience. So if you want to check that out, that's there. And I'll be doing, of course, my typical analysis and reviews, discussions on various things. I've had one gentleman. I'm almost beginning to regret some of these requests, because one guy said you like requests, so he requested that I do everything Planet of the Apes related.
Oh my
The
goodness.
novel, all the movies, and the TV shows,
Wow.
and the cartoon series. So
I forgot about
That's
the
ambitious.
cartoon.
So I'm going to spread that out, but I will
Okay.
I will get that done. At
Wow,
some point.
that is ambitious.
And I love Planet of the Apes, so
Yeah.
it's certainly something, but I was not expecting that. So
All right.
a lot of Planet of the
Good,
Apes.
good request. And we're up to almost 100 subscribers here on our channel, so if you have not joined up on there, please do so. And who knows, maybe you'll be number 100. That would be fun. And then we also have the Facebook group, Film Fanatics with an exclamation point, and the Twitter feed at Film Fanatics Pod. That is going to do it for this week, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye.